Greetings, my name is Kerry and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about some of the longest books on my Goodreads TBR. I actually started filming this a week ago and then realised I hadn't double checked that the editions I had on Goodreads matched the editions I had on my shelves. So I have corrected that now and double checked, and it actually has adjusted the list slightly. So I thought I'd do this because people have seemed fairly interested in this type of video that I've done before. So I've done the books that have been on my TBR the longest and the books that have the highest ratings on Goodreads. So I can link those down in the description if you want to go and check those out. And I've got a couple more ideas for different ways of looking at my massive TBR. You can see behind me, if you are not familiar with the size of my TBR, there's gaps obviously where I've taken these books off, but on the shelves behind me, anything from the cats downwards and this way are books that I own but have not read yet. So I have a big issue and I'm trying to work through some of the oldest books on my TBR this year. I'm trying to cut it down as much as I can, and this is the most intimidating video that I've made relating to my TBR so far, because these books are long and they're all on there and I really want to read all of them, and so I'm gonna have to get to them at some point. But when you read long books, they take ages and it means you can't read shorter books, although I sometimes do. I sometimes have a break in the middle. Anyway, so without too much further ado, I'm gonna get into the books. I'm just quickly going to talk about some that are on the list on Goodreads but I'm not counting for this video, if that makes sense, for various reasons. So the first one of these is Defining Moments in Music, which if you saw my TBR tag, I can't remember what it's called, but I'll link it below anyway. It was a book tag about your TBR. I mentioned this as a book that I'm unlikely to actually read because it's kind of a coffee table book, so it has just short excerpts about some key moments in the history of popular music. It's one that I might dip in and out of. At some point I might read sections of it or sort of read maybe a little bit every day. I might read cover to cover, but it won't be like a quick sit down. It's not like a novel that you can sit down and read in one sitting. So I wanted to leave that one out of the rankings. That has 800 pages. That's not counted in the top 10. And there are two others that similarly I'm not counting in the top 10, and these are omnibus editions that at some point I'm going to be replacing with individual editions. So we've got my F. Scott Fitzgerald omnibus, which has 5 books in it. I've already got a new copy of The Great Gatsby as a single volume, and I'm looking to replace this with single volumes, but I'm keeping it so I remember what's in it because I want to read all of these books. I just don't want to read them in this heavy hardback fat omnibus edition. So that has 863 pages, and similarly I've got this Rudyard Kipling one which has, I think, has 6 books in it there, and again I want to get individual copies of each of these books, and this has 864 pages. So those two books are again not included in the rankings because of that, because I'm going to get individual copies of those books at some point. So we're going to go from 10th through to 1, so the final book I'm going to talk about is the longest book on my TBR. So in 10th position with 781 pages is Middlemarch by George Eliot. This is the Wordsworth Classics edition. I quite like George Eliot. I've read a couple of her books. I've read The Mill on the Floss and Daniel Deronda. I think that's all the ones I've read so far actually. So I've got Middlemarch and I've got Silas Marner to read at some point, and that's all the ones by her that I own, but I do want to carry on reading her. This is quite a hefty one, so I don't know if I'll read this or if I'll read Silas Marner first because that's much shorter. I know a lot of people really love this book. I don't really know what it's about, but it's a classic and I quite like classics, so I'll get round to that at some point. In 9th place with 794 pages we have Out of the Hitler Time by Judith Kerr. This is actually a collection of 3 stories, so it is an omnibus edition, but I intentionally bought this because it is quite light and it was cheaper than buying the individual books, and it's designed to be a bound up copy of her 3 books. So the 3 books are When Hitler Stole Pink Rabbit, Bombs on Aunt Dainty, and A Small Person Far Away. And even though this is actually 794 pages, nearly 800 pages long, but it's not heavy, it's not weighty, it doesn't look that long. It feels like it's a much shorter book, and because it's 3 books in one, I don't think it will be a long or difficult read. The annoying thing about this one, the only annoying thing about this as an omnibus edition, is that it restarts a page numbering for each book, which slightly irritated me because it meant I had to do maths to check if this was actually as long as Goodreads said it was, but never mind. So this is novelisations of Judith Kerr's own experiences growing up as a child in Nazi Germany, and then they left just before the Second World War started and moved to London, and it's sort of her story growing up, but she sort of fictionalised it and based it like around another character, a little girl called Anna. So I'm really excited to read that. They're also illustrated by her as well, so she's fairly well known as an illustrator as well. She wrote The Tiger That Came to Tea, if you're familiar with that book. So they did an exhibition of some of her drawings at a local National Trust place last year, and it was really lovely. So yeah, looking forward to getting around to that one. In 8th place with 920 pages is The Brothers Karamazov by Fyodor Dostoyevsky. I've not read any Dostoyevsky yet. I don't know that much about this story, other than that it's a classic and lots of people love it. I've not read any Dostoyevsky before, so I'm quite looking forward to reading that at some point. And I've got Crime and Punishment to read at some point as well, but yeah, that's that one. In 7th place with 932 pages is Little Dorrit by Charles Dickens. I have seen the TV adaptation of this and I loved it, and I bought the book shortly afterwards, and that was several years ago, and I still haven't got around to it because it's such a beast. And I have quite a lot of Dickens books that I haven't read yet, but this is one that I really do want to get to soon, so I might try and read it this year, although I've also want to try and finish all the Anthony Trollope books I've got this year as well, so we'll see if I manage it or not. I might aim for it at the end of the year. So this is the story of the central character Dorrit, who has grown up in the, what do they call it, debtor's prison, because her father is in a lot of debt, and it's what happens to her and her family. And the TV adaptation was brilliant, so I'm really looking forward to reading the original, because they have to miss bits out, but I do love Dickens adaptations. They're generally pretty good. So then in 6th place with 956 pages we have Citadel by Kate Mosse. So I got the really nice limited edition gold cover edition of the paperback. So this is the 3rd book in the Languedoc trilogy. I read the first 2 books ages ago and haven't got around to the 3rd one yet. They're sort of loose sequels, so you have to read them in order, but the events don't directly follow on from each other. It's just there are some characters that have appeared in both the first 2 books that I'm assuming appear in this one as well, and sort of the settings are quite similar. So I'm thinking I can probably read this one without having to reread the first 2, but I might reread them depending on how I feel and how much pressure I have from, as I mentioned, the great number of books on my TBR sometimes means that I don't feel like I can reread books, which is a real shame. But I am looking forward to finishing off this trilogy at some point, and I really do love this cover, it's so shiny. Anyway, in 5th place at 986 pages, this one is heavy, we've got the Sherlock Holmes Complete Illustrated Short Stories. I got this in a charity shop and it's a really lovely edition actually, I really like it. So for all my complaints about omnibus editions, I like having all of these stories in one place. Because the stories themselves are so short, this is one that I probably will try and read maybe a short story a day at some point, and I'll keep it for like bedtime reading. It won't be one that I'll want to carry about with me, because I tend to find that I prefer to read short stories in small doses, like one a day, rather than a novel which I'll carry around and read at lunchtime and stuff. I'll read one short story a day at bedtime. So that's probably what will happen with this one. At the moment I'm reading a book of Grimm's fairy tales, so I'm trying to finish that one, and then I might start on this one, or poetry or a play or something that I tend to class in that same sort of category of something that you read in small chunks daily. So I will get around to these at some point. And I've also got the complete novels as well, and another book that you'll have seen in the highest rated books on my TBR. Was it in that one? I can't remember. Anyway, so I'll probably try and read them all chronologically at some point. And then in 4th place, coming in at just over, so the rest are all over 1,000 pages. So the next one at 1,006 pages is Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell by Susanna Clarke. This is the TV tie-in edition from the BBC adaptation that was on a few years ago, which I really enjoyed. And I'd heard of the book before that and hadn't known what it was about and hadn't been that interested in reading it. And then I saw that adaptation, I was like, okay, this is the sort of book that I would really love. It's sort of a blend of historical fiction and fantasy, so it's like magical realism set in the Napoleonic Wars. The adaptation was beautiful, it was really well made, and it just seemed right up my street. So I went out and bought this as soon as possible afterwards. I got this secondhand, and I don't mind that it's the TV tie-in edition either, because I quite liked it. This one is definitely high on my TBR. I want to read it sooner rather than later. Whether I'll get to it this year or not, again, I don't know, because as I mentioned, lots of books to get through, and long books take a long time. In third place, coming in at 1,104 pages, we have The Forsyte Saga by John Galsworthy. Again, I think this is a couple of books in one. Look at that. I've not really looked at this edition very much. That's the family tree. That's so cool. This is quite an old book. I'm trying not to rip it. But again, because it's quite an old book, it's not actually that heavy or that big. So this one is one that I don't mind reading in an omnibus, because I'm a bit fickle apparently. I don't really know very much about this, just that this was an old pretty book that cost me £1, probably in a charity shop, I don't really remember. Again, I think it's been adapted for TV, but I've never seen it. I think it's sort of a family, well, assuming from the family tree, it's like a family chronicle type book, or family saga I suppose would be the correct term, but that has different connotations in the publishing industry, so who knows. Anyway, yeah, that one, I don't really know what to say about it, because I don't know very much about it. In second place, coming in at a grand total of 1,130 pages, we have The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas. Again, don't know a lot about it, other than that it's a classic. A lot of people love it. Someone told me the other day this is their favourite ever book, so that really intrigued me, made me really want to pick it up sometime soon. But it's a beast, it's so fat. I don't know why I'm so intimidated by long books, because if I'm enjoying them I get through them really quickly. I think partly because a lot of these are classics, that's what makes them a bit more intimidating as well, because the style of writing is not so much what we're used to these days. Modern long books fit more in with our like common use of language, and that makes them a bit more straightforward to read, if that makes sense. I'm not at all familiar with Dumas' writing style. I do have the Three Musketeers as well, I haven't read it. I also have the Three Musketeers in French, which I again have not read yet. I will get around to this at some point, and don't know when. I do want to read it, definitely. I want to read all of these, but yeah, I don't really know very much about it. I'm assuming it's about a count. And then finally, the longest book on my TBR. So I'm worried you're gonna accuse me of cheating slightly here, but never mind. So the longest book on my TBR, coming in at 1,154 pages, is The Small House at Allington by Anthony Trollope. This is I think the fourth book in the Chronicles of Barsetshire, or the fifth, I don't really remember. I'm saying book, I actually have it in a 2-volume edition, so we've got volume 1 and 2, but when I was looking for them on Goodreads, there actually are classed as one book on Goodreads. It's in the listings, because I was looking for them as separate volumes, but they're listed together as a 2-volume edition. So I'm counting it. They're about 600 pages each, just under 600 pages each. I really love the Barsetshire books. I've only read 2 of them so far. So I've read The Warden, which is the first one, and I read Dr. Thorne, which is the third one, but I read that before I read the first one because I didn't realise it was part of a series. They're sort of loosely connected, so some characters and settings appear in both novels. So I'm going to try and read through the rest of the series in order this year. I'll probably reread Dr. Thorne as well in context of the other books to see what the connections are between the novels. But I really like Trollope's writing style. He's similar to Dickens but less preachy, which if I had to criticise Charles Dickens's writing at all, it's that he can get a little bit preachy and too much on the social commentary sometimes. Trollope's got a slightly gentler writing style, so I'm really looking forward to reading these. I will be reading these this year because I'm trying to finish that series this year. I say that in great confidence. Whether or not it will actually happen or not, we shall see, but my aim is to read the rest of this series this year, so hopefully that will happen. Anyway, that's all I've got for you today. I had thought about making an equivalent longest books I've read video, and then when I looked on Goodreads I realised that about half of that list was books from the Wheel of Time series, which I thought would not be very interesting. So I won't be making that one anytime soon, but maybe once I've read a few of these and these are on my longest books I've read list, and you might get to see that video, who knows. So that's it for today. Let me know if you've read any of these books. Let me know if you read any of these books and what you thought of them. If there's any that you think I should get to sooner rather than later, please let me know. Yeah, please like and subscribe if you haven't already, and that's all I have for you today. So thank you so much for watching, and I will talk to you again soon. Bye!